A boot slammed into a woman's ribs. She curled around a little girl underneath her, taking the hit on her own back instead. A second man grabbed her hair and yanked her up off the dirt. A third stood laughing, spinning his revolver on one finger. The girl screamed. The woman shoved her behind a water trough and stood back up, blood on her teeth. She didn't run. She didn't beg. She just stood between those three men and the child. Her name was Sarah Kinnick, a widow, and this wasn't the first time men like this had come around. Then hooves hit the ground. Hard. Fast. One rider. Big enough to block out the sun behind him. What did that cowboy do in the next 10 seconds that made three armed men forget how to breathe? Stay with me. This one's worth it. The rider closed the last stretch of ground before his horse even stopped moving. He swung down and hit the dirt walking, like the animal underneath him was already an afterthought. Boots planted between Sarah and the three men before anyone had time to react. He didn't reach for a gun, didn't raise a fist. He just stood there, wide as a barn door, and looked at the man spinning the revolver like it was a toy. Why are you on her land? Flat. No heat in it. Just a question that expected an answer. The one holding Sarah's hair let go of it like it had turned hot in his hand. She dropped back to her knees, caught herself, and stood again, wiping blood off her lip with the back of her wrist. This ain't your business, mister, the young one said. Couldn't have been past 20. Voice cracked a little on the word mister. Made it my business when I saw a boot go into a woman's ribs. Nobody answered that right away. The man with the revolver kept spinning it, slow, like he had all the time in the world. Sarah spoke up, breathing hard. Water rights, she said. My husband's been dead 2 winters. Cattle outfit wants what's under my land. Been sending men to scare me off ever since. They send you? Tom asked, not looking at her. Eyes still on the three men. They send everybody eventually. Her voice was steady, but her hands weren't. The young one glanced sideways at the others, looking for someone to tell him what to do. The middle one, broader, older, a knife on his belt he clearly knew how to use, didn't look nervous at all. He looked bored, like this was Tuesday. And the third, the one spinning the gun. He stopped spinning it just long enough to holster it, slow, deliberate, like he wanted everyone watching to notice how smooth he did it. Name's Dutch Meller, he said. And you just stepped into something bigger than you know, friend. Tom didn't answer right away. He was looking at the way Dutch's hand had settled near the grip, the way his thumb kept brushing the hammer without pulling it. A man who liked people to watch him get ready more than he liked actually drawing. Tom had seen that tell before. Men who spun revolvers for show usually weren't the fastest guns in a fight. They were the loudest. You're not here to kill her, Tom said. Not yet. Outfit wants the water, not a murder charge hanging over their heads. That means you're just here to scare a widow and a little girl. Dutch's jaw worked. And who in the hell are you supposed to be? Tom Garrity. He said it plain, no weight behind it, like a man giving his order at a counter. But Sarah's eyes flicked toward him fast when she heard it. She'd heard that name somewhere. Everyone in the territory had, one way or another. Quiet man. Did his work and moved on. Bad temper if you pushed him past where he wanted to go. The young one laughed first, high and forced. Garrity. Never heard of him. You will. The knife-carrying one muttered, low, mostly to himself. Dutch smirked and looked Tom up and down like he was sizing up a side of beef. 1 man against 3. That's cute. Wasn't planning on this taking long, Tom said. The girl was still crouched behind the trough, small hands gripping the wood, eyes wide over the top of it. Sarah kept glancing back at her every few seconds, like she couldn't help it, like her whole body was still bent toward protecting that child, even standing upright. Inside the cabin, just past the open door, a rifle leaned against the frame. Her husband's. Never fired since he'd died. It had sat there through every visit like these men, through every threat, doing nothing because there'd been nobody steady enough to hold it. Dutch's men were grinning now, loose, confident. 3 against 1 looked like good odds to them. They didn't know yet what they were looking at. Tom didn't move his feet, didn't puff his chest. He just stood there, calm in a way that unsettled all 3 of them more than shouting would have. Calm men didn't back down easy. Calm men usually had a reason to be calm. Last chance to ride off, Tom said. Save everybody the trouble. Dutch's smirk didn't move. Finish this, he told his men. And that was the last mistake he'd get to make standing on his own 2 feet for a while. The young one moved first. That was his mistake. Nerves make a man rush. and rushing makes a man slow in all the ways that matter. Tom didn't wait for the fist to land. He stepped into it instead of away, closing the distance before the boy even finished cocking his arm back. One hit. Short, hard, right under the jaw. The boy's head snapped sideways and his legs just quit on him. He hit the dirt and didn't move except to groan. 3 seconds. That's all it took. The knife came out next. The mid-level one, the one who'd looked bored a minute ago, wasn't bored anymore. He'd seen enough fights to know the young one going down that fast meant something. He pulled steel and came in low, the way a man does when he actually knows how to use a blade. Tom caught his wrist before the knife ever got close. Twisted it hard, one clean motion, and there was a sound like a green branch snapping. The man screamed and dropped the knife in the dirt, cradling his arm against his chest, fingers already swelling. Sarah's daughter watched all of it from behind the water trough, both hands pressed over her own mouth now, eyes locked on the big man moving like nothing in the world could slow him down. That left Dutch. He'd been reaching for his revolver since the first punch landed, but reaching wasn't the same as drawing, and drawing wasn't the same as firing. Tom crossed the last few feet before Dutch's hand even closed all the way around the grip. He drove his shoulder into Dutch's chest and put him flat on his back in the dirt, hard enough to knock the wind clean out of him. The gun came free of the holster halfway through the fall, and Tom's hand was already there, wrapping around the barrel, twisting it out of Dutch's grip before he could line up a shot at anything but sky. Dutch lay there in the dirt, gasping, staring up at the man standing over him with his own revolver now pointed loosely at the ground between them. Nobody said anything for a second. The young one was still down. The mid-level man was on his knees now, holding his broken wrist, rocking slightly, teeth gritted. And Dutch Meller, who spun his gun for show and liked being watched doing it, was on his back in front of a widow and her daughter, beaten by one man he'd walked in thinking would be easy work. That was the part that would stick with him, not the pain. The audience. "Get up," Tom said, not shouting, just flat, same as before. Dutch got up slow, one hand pressed to his ribs where Tom's shoulder had caught him. He didn't look at Sarah, didn't look at the girl. He looked at his own gun in Tom's hand like he couldn't quite believe it belonged to somebody else now. "This ain't over," Dutch said, voice tight, more air in it than usual. "Wasn't asking for your opinion on that," Tom said. "Get your men and get off our land." Dutch's jaw worked again, same tell as before, but there was nothing behind it now. No move left to make. He looked at the young one, still groaning in the dirt, and jerked his head toward the horses. The knife man got up on his own, cradling his wrist, and staggered toward his saddle without being told twice. They rode off slow at first, then faster once they cleared the fence line, dust kicking up behind 3 horses instead of the confident walk they'd come in with. Dutch turned back once before he was too far off to matter. "We'll be back," he called, "with more men. And Rourke won't send boys next time." Tom didn't answer. He just watched them go until the dust settled and the road was empty again. Sarah was already moving toward the trough, dropping to her knees, pulling her daughter out from behind it and into her arms. The girl was shaking, small fists gripping her mother's shirt, face buried against her shoulder. Sarah held her tight, one hand smoothing her hair, murmuring something too quiet for Tom to hear. He gave them the moment, walked instead toward the cabin door, where the rifle still leaned against the frame, untouched, same as it had been the whole fight. He picked it up, checked the chamber out of habit more than need, and set it back exactly where it had stood. Then he sat down on the porch step, Dutch's revolver still loose in his hand. He turned it over once, looking at the worn grip, the little notches near the hammer where somebody, Dutch, probably, had kept some kind of count. He set it down on the porch rail beside him, barrel pointed away from the house. Sarah came up a few minutes later, her daughter finally quiet, sitting now on the porch steps a few feet off, watching everything with wide, tired eyes. Sarah carried a tin cup of water and held it out to Tom without a word. He took it, drank half of it in one go. The kind of quiet that comes after a fight settled over the yard. Horses gone, dust down, birds picking back up their noise in the trees like nothing had happened at all. "Thank you," Sarah said finally, sitting down on the step below him, close enough to talk without raising her voice. "Wasn't going to just ride past," Tom said. She looked at the revolver on the rail, then at him. "They'll come back." He said so. Men like that always say that. She didn't push it further. The girl had crawled up next to her now, half asleep against her side despite everything, worn out from fear the way children get. Sarah wrapped an arm around her and looked out at the empty road. Quiet. Like maybe for now. At least for tonight, that was the end of it. Tom finished the water and set the cup down beside him. The porch was still. The sun was dropping low over the fence line. For a moment, it really did feel like it was over. Hooves again. Faster this time, coming from the opposite direction Dutch had ridden off in. Tom was on his feet before Sarah finished turning her head. One rider, no dust cloud behind him big enough for a posse. Just a man leaning hard over his horse's neck like the ground behind him was on fire. He hauled up at the fence line and near fell out of the saddle, breathing rough, and pointed back down the road without even getting the words out first. Fence post, he managed. Half-mile down. You need to see it. Sarah told her daughter to stay on the porch. Tom didn't wait for anybody's permission. He walked the half-mile fast, the rider trailing behind on his horse, and there it was, nailed crooked to a post like somebody had done it in a hurry and didn't much care how it looked. A wanted poster, torn at one corner, weathered from wherever it had traveled before it ended up out here. Tom's face on it. Not a perfect likeness, the kind of rough sketch a lawman draws from memory, but close enough. Close enough that anybody who'd looked at him twice today would know. The rider, an older man Sarah apparently knew from town, filled in the rest without being asked. Dutch's outfit wasn't just some cattle company's hired muscle working for wages. They worked for Silas Rourke, and Rourke didn't just own land around here. He owned the sheriff too, or close enough to it that the badge didn't mean much once Rourke decided something needed handling. Dutch rode straight into town an hour ago, the man said. Showed the sheriff this. 2 counties over. Some trouble with a man matching your description. There's a reward on it. Tom stood there looking at his own face nailed to a post in the middle of nowhere, and something in his jaw went tight and still. This changed everything. Not the size of the fight. The shape of it. Yesterday, this had been about 3 men leaning on a widow to get at water she wasn't going to give up. That was a fight Tom knew how to have. Fists, a drawn gun, a bit of nerve. He'd settled fights like that before and ridden on the next morning without looking back. This was different. If Rourke had the sheriff, then this wasn't 3 hired hands anymore. This was the law itself, dressed-up official, coming to collect a wanted man off a widow's land. And the second that happened, Sarah wasn't just a widow standing up to bullies. She was a woman harboring a fugitive. That charge could take her land faster than any water rights dispute ever would. It could take her daughter too, handed off to some county office while her mother sat in a cell. Tom tore the poster down off the post himself, folded it rough, and carried it back with him. He didn't say much on the walk back to the ranch. Didn't need to. Sarah saw his face before he said a word and knew whatever had happened down that road wasn't good. He handed her the poster without ceremony. She unfolded it, read it, and her hand went still on the paper like she couldn't quite make her fingers move it any further. This you, she said. Not really a question. It's me. What did you do? Doesn't matter right now what I did 2 counties over. What matters is Rourke's got that sheriff's badge in his pocket, and he just found a reason to put men on your land that wears the law's own coat while he does it. Sarah looked toward the porch, where her daughter was sitting exactly where she'd been told to stay, small and quiet, watching the 2 of them talk without understanding any of it. Sarah's jaw tightened the same way it had when that boot had gone into her ribs earlier that day. Same fear, different shape. They'll say I'm hiding you, she said. They will. They could take her. Her voice cracked just slightly on that word, her. They could say I'm unfit, harboring a fugitive with a child in the house, and take her while they sort it out. Tom didn't answer that right away, because there wasn't a good answer. It was true, and both of them knew it. That evening a second rider came, slower this time. No urgency in the pace because there didn't need to be any. He didn't get down off his horse. Just called out from the fence line that he was carrying word from the sheriff's office, official as anything, and Sarah walked out to hear it herself. 3 days. That was the offer. Sign over the water rights to Rourke's outfit within 3 days, or the sheriff would come out personally to handle the trespasser known to be hiding on her property. The rider said the word trespasser with a little smile that made it clear everybody already knew exactly who that meant. He rode off without waiting for an answer. Didn't need one yet. 3 days was plenty of time for a woman to think about what she stood to lose. Sarah stood at the fence a long while after he'd gone, poster still folded in her hand, staring down the empty road same as she had that afternoon before Tom's horse ever came thundering into view. If you're still with me, hit that subscribe button, because this is where it gets personal for both of them. That night, after the girl was finally asleep, Sarah sat across from Tom at the table, a single lamp burning low between them, and laid it out plain. Leaving meant Tom rode off before the sheriff ever showed, maybe saved his own neck, left her alone again with a signature she didn't want to give. Staying meant a wanted man standing on her porch when the law came calling, and no telling what that cost either one of them. Tom turned the folded poster over once in his hands, looked at his own rough face staring back at him, and set it down on the table between them like he'd already made his decision before she'd finished asking the question. "I'm not riding off and leaving you and that girl to face this alone," he said. "Not again for anybody." The 3 days passed slower than any 3 days Sarah could remember, and on the morning of the third, she was up before the sun, standing at the window with the poster still folded on the table where Tom had left it. Tom was already outside. He'd spent the night cleaning the rifle from the doorway, checking the action, loading it with shells Sarah didn't know she still had. Dutch's revolver sat on his hip now, not the porch rail. He'd worn it since sundown the night before, like a man getting used to the weight of something that wasn't his. Sarah's daughter stayed inside, told plain by her mother to keep low and stay away from the windows no matter what she heard. The girl didn't argue this time. She'd learned enough in 3 days to know when arguing wasn't worth it. They heard the riders before they saw them. A lot of hooves, more than 3 men's worth. Tom stepped off the porch and walked to the middle of the yard, same spot he'd stood in that first afternoon. Sarah came out behind him, close to the door, but not through it, one hand resting on the frame near where the rifle used to lean. 6 riders came over the rise, dust rolling up behind them thick enough to blot out the fence line. In front, on a horse too fine for the work he did, rode a man Sarah had never seen up close before but had heard plenty about. Silas Rourke, gray at the temples, coat too clean for a ranch road, the kind of man who let other men do his bleeding for him. Dutch rode just behind his left shoulder, jaw still faintly bruised, one hand resting near his empty holster like the absence of that revolver bothered him more than the bruise ever could. Rourke pulled up 30 feet out and looked at the porch like he expected to find a frightened widow standing alone. Instead, he found a big man standing in the yard with a rifle in both hands and a revolver on his hip that Rourke's own foreman had lost 3 days earlier. "You're supposed to be 2 counties over," Rourke said, like that was the most interesting thing about the whole scene. "Change of plans," Tom said. Rourke's eyes flicked to Sarah in the doorway, then back to Tom. "You know what happens to a woman caught hiding a wanted man? I'd have thought a man who cared about her would have ridden on by now and spared her the trouble." "I heard the offer," Tom said. 3 days. Sign the water rights, or the law handles the trespasser. That's you talking through a badge you bought, not the law doing its job. Rourke's mouth tightened just slightly. "Careful. You brought 6 men to collect 1 reward on a poster," Tom said. "That tells me you're not near as sure of your sheriff's paperwork as you'd like folks to believe." Dutch shifted in his saddle, and that was when Tom turned his attention to him direct, loud enough for all 6 riders to hear plain. "Dutch Meller," Tom said, "tell your boss what happened 3 days ago. Tell him how it went when it was just you and your 2 men against 1. Dutch's jaw worked, same tell he'd had from the start, but there was nothing behind it. He didn't answer. "Go on," Tom said. "Tell him about the young one you sent in first, out cold in 1 hit. Tell him about the wrist you heard snap on your knife man. Tell him whose gun is sitting on my hip right now." One of the 6 riders, an older hand near the back, let out a short laugh before he could stop himself, and Dutch's face went red under the bruise. "That's enough," Rourke said, sharp now, and the laughing stopped. But it had landed. Sarah could see it on the other riders' faces, a flicker of doubt. Men who'd signed on to collect a reward against a scared widow, not to ride down a man who'd already put 3 of their own in the dirt without drawing first. Rourke straightened in the saddle and raised a hand. "Take him." Nobody moved. Rourke's hand stayed up, waiting for hooves to start, for men to fan out the way 6 against 1 was supposed to go. Instead, there was just the sound of horses shifting their weight, and Dutch staring at his own boots like he didn't much want to be first through that gate a second time. "I said take him," Rourke barked again, and this time 2 men did start forward, slow, more out of habit than conviction. Tom raised the rifle, not at the 2 riders coming, at Rourke. Call them back, Tom said. Or the first shot's yours, not theirs. Rourke froze halfway between fury and fear, and for one long second nobody in that yard breathed. Sarah's hand tightened on the doorframe. Somewhere behind her, through the thin wall, she could hear her daughter's breath catching, listening, not looking, just as she'd been told. Then Dutch's revolver hand, the one that used to spin a gun nobody ever saw him fire, twitched toward his own hip out of pure reflex, forgetting for half a second that the gun wasn't there anymore. That was the moment the two advancing riders stopped on their own, without being called back at all. They'd seen it too, a man reaching for a weapon that wasn't there. It told them everything about who actually had control of this yard. Rourke saw it break in his men's faces before Tom said another word. The doubt, the hesitation. 6 men who came expecting an easy collection, now staring at a widow's porch where the odds had somehow turned upside down. This isn't finished, Rourke said, voice low now, all the polish gone out of it. It is for today, Tom said. You want that reward? You send men who don't flinch. Judging by what just happened, that's not the 6 you brought. Rourke held Tom's eyes a long moment, calculating something Sarah couldn't read, then wheeled his horse around hard enough to kick dirt into Dutch's face. The 6 riders followed, slower, glancing back once or twice like they weren't fully sure that was the right call even as they made it. Dust settled. The yard went quiet. Sarah let out a breath she hadn't known she was holding, and behind her, the door creaked open just an inch, one small face peering out to see if it was safe yet. Tom lowered the rifle slow, watching the dust settle where 6 riders had turned tail. He didn't holster Dutch's revolver right away. He just stood there a minute, letting his own breathing settle, listening to the sound of hooves fade off toward the horizon until there was nothing left but wind moving through the fence posts. Sarah's daughter pushed the door open the rest of the way and ran out barefoot across the yard, straight past her mother, and wrapped both arms around Tom's leg before anybody could stop her. He looked down at her, a little surprised, and set the rifle against his shoulder so he could rest a hand on top of her head. They're gone, she said, like she needed to hear somebody say it out loud to believe it. For now, Tom said. But yeah, gone. Sarah came down off the porch slower, still watching the empty road like Rourke might change his mind and turn that horse around. He didn't. The dust kept settling, and after a while there was nothing out there at all except the fence line and the long flat stretch of grass behind it. He'll go to the sheriff, Sarah said. Try again through the badge. Maybe. Tom finally holstered the revolver. But he rode out here with 6 men expecting an easy job and rode home with nothing. That's not the kind of story a man like Rourke wants told around town. Men who work for him talk. Word gets around that his hired guns won't hold their nerve. That's bad for business. She didn't answer right away. She just watched the road a while longer, then looked down at her daughter, still holding onto Tom's leg like she wasn't ready to let go of anybody yet. 3 weeks passed before anything about the ranch changed shape again, and none of it came the way Sarah expected. No sheriff rode out. No poster got renewed. Word came through town instead, secondhand, the way most true things do out in that country, that Rourke's foreman down in the other county had gotten tangled up in a land dispute of his own and hadn't the patience anymore to chase 2 counties over for a reward that had already turned into a joke among his own men. The poster stayed folded in a drawer in Sarah's cabin. She kept it, not out of fear anymore, just because it was the only proof, if anybody ever asked, of exactly what Tom had risked staying on when leaving would have been so much easier. The rifle stayed by the door too, though it looked different now than it had that first afternoon. Cleaned, oiled, used, finally, the way her husband had probably meant it to be used all along, if he'd lived long enough to need it. Dutch's revolver never left Tom's hip after that. He wore it the way a man wears something he earned honest, not stolen. A reminder more than a weapon most days. Tom didn't ride on the way drifters usually do once trouble clears. He built a lean-to near the barn first, told himself it was just until things settled, then kept finding reasons the settling wasn't quite done yet. Sarah didn't push him to stay and didn't push him to leave either. She just kept setting an extra plate at supper without much comment, and after enough weeks of that, neither one of them needed to say out loud what it meant. Her daughter took to following him around the property in the mornings, watching him mend fence line, asking him more questions than any grown man really wanted to answer about horses and guns, and why he'd stopped that day instead of riding past like everybody else always had. Because nobody should have to stand alone against 3 men, he told her once, mending a post while she watched. Not your mother. Not anybody. She thought about that a long moment, the way kids do when they're turning something over that's bigger than they are yet. Were you scared? A little, he said. Man tells you he wasn't scared standing between a woman and 3 armed men. He's lying to you. But you did it anyway. Yeah. She seemed satisfied with that answer and went back to trailing him down the fence line, asking about something else entirely a minute later, the way children do, moving on faster than grown folks ever manage to. Sarah stood on the porch some evenings and watched the 2 of them out there, man and girl, fence and horizon, and thought about that first afternoon. The boot in her ribs. The hair yanked back. The way she'd stood up anyway with blood on her teeth because there hadn't been anybody else to stand up for her. Not once. Not in 2 whole winters alone. There was somebody now. Not because she needed saving exactly. She'd already proven, that first day, she'd stand between danger and her daughter with nothing but her own 2 hands if that's all she had. But because standing alone and standing with somebody weren't the same kind of standing, and she'd learned the difference the hard way, watching a stranger swing down off a horse before it even finished stopping. Tom never talked about the 2 counties over, whatever it was that had put his face on that poster. Sarah never asked twice. Some things a person carries and some things get set down, and whichever one that turned out to be, it didn't change what he'd done standing in her yard with a rifle aimed at a man who thought he owned the law. The water still ran through her land, same as it always had, and for now, at least, nobody was coming to take it. The fence held. The rifle stayed loaded by the door, ready, finally, the way it should have been all along. And in the evenings, when the work was done, the 3 of them sat on that porch together and watched the road stay empty, the way roads are supposed to stay when the troubles finally, truly passed.